There are days that are just days. You wake up, you drink your coffee, you go to work. They are forgotten. And then there were days that are burned into the memory of the world. Days that rip the timeline in two, before and after. November 22nd, 1963. It started with a sun so bright it seemed to wash away all the shadows. America was young, it was hopeful, it was confident. And at the head of it all was the new royalty. Not kings and queens of old, but something new, vibrant. John F. Kennedy. He wasn't just a president, he was an idea, a promise. The handsome war hero, the brilliant orator, the man who would stare down the apocalypse during the Cuban Missile Crisis and force the world to blink. And beside him, Jacqueline, a woman who defined grace and style for a generation. Together, they were Camelot, a golden, fleeting moment where everything seemed possible. That morning, in Dallas, Texas, the air was crisp. The trip was political. Texas was a tough state, a powder keg of conservative anger and political division. Kennedy was there to mend fences, to rally the base, to prepare for the '64 election. They landed at Love Field to a surprisingly warm welcome. The crowds were cheering, smiling, reaching out. Jackie, radiant in a pink Chanel suit, was given a bouquet of red roses. The plan was simple, a 10-mile motorcade through the city, ending at the Trade Mart for a luncheon. The bubble top of the presidential limousine, the SS-100X, had been removed. The Secret Service had advised against it, but Kennedy had been firm. "Let them see us," he'd said. "Let them touch us." He wanted to feel the people. He wanted them to feel him. And so, they set off. A rolling parade of hope. Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie sat in front of the Kennedys. The streets were lined with thousands, faces, blurred by motion, all turned toward the car. Nellie Connally, turning back to the president, smiled and said the words that would echo for eternity. "Mr. President," she said, "you can't say Dallas doesn't love you." Kennedy, smiling that 1,000-watt smile, replied, "No, you certainly can't." They were the last words he would ever speak. The music becomes tense. A low, ominous drone begins to fade in. The motorcade made its slow, deliberate turn onto Elm Street, heading into the concrete canyon of Dealey Plaza. The crowds thinned slightly. On the right, a grassy knoll. Ahead, a triple underpass. And to the back, a 7-story red brick building, the Texas School Book Depository. It was 12:30 p.m., Central Standard Time. A sharp, cracking sound, like a backfire or a firecracker. Pause. In the car, Kennedy's smile faltered. His hands, which had been waving, suddenly flew to his throat. He was hit. Governor Connally, in front of him, stiffened. He cried out, "Oh, no, no, no! They're going to kill us all!" He, too, had been hit, a single bullet tearing through his back, his chest, his wrist. But the world was still in slow motion. The crowd was confused. Was it part of the show? A joke? Clint Hill, the Secret Service agent riding on the car behind, knew instantly. His eyes, trained for this, saw the president lurch. He began to sprint, leaping from his car to the president's. A second, louder, sharper, crack. This was the one that shattered everything. It's a moment frozen in time, burned onto the public consciousness by a single, silent, 8mm nightmare, the Zapruder film. The bullet struck the president in the back of the head. It was a catastrophic, devastating wound. The force of it was so violent, it snapped his head back into the left. A mist of red and gray exploded from the car. America's innocence vanished in that cloud of red. Jackie, who had been looking at her husband in confusion, was now splattered with the contents of his skull. A primal, animalistic cry ripped from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. "My God! My God, they've killed my husband! Jack! Jack!" She scrambled onto the back trunk of the moving car. For years, people thought she was trying to escape. She wasn't. She was trying to retrieve a piece of her husband's head, a piece of the man she loved. Clint Hill finally reached the car, pushing Jackie back down into the seat, shielding her body with his own as the limousine finally accelerated. It rocketed down the street, under the triple underpass, and disappeared, heading for Parkland Memorial Hospital. The music swells, filled with chaos, strings, and panic. Dealey Plaza was instant bedlam. People were screaming, running, dropping to the grass, shielding their children. Police officers who just moments before had been watching the parade were now scrambling, guns drawn, shouting into their radios. "A shot! From the book depository! No, the grassy knoll!" The world's before had just ended. The after had begun. At Parkland Hospital, it was a scene of clinical, desperate chaos. The president was rushed into Trauma Room 1. He was, for all intents and purposes, already gone. The head wound was massive. The doctors, led by Dr. Malcolm Perry, tried. They performed a tracheotomy. They administered blood. They tried to will him back to life. But it was no use. A Catholic priest was called. Last rites were administered. At 1 p.m., just 30 minutes after the shots rang out, John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, was pronounced dead. The world stopped. In homes, in offices, in schools, the news spread like a shockwave. On CBS, Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, sat at his news desk. He read the bulletin from UPI. From Dallas, Texas, the flash apparently official. President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Cronkite stopped. He adjusted his glasses. He took them off. He looked down, his voice thick with an emotion the nation had never seen from him. And in that moment, he was not an anchorman. He was all of us. He was a nation, suddenly orphaned, suddenly terrified. America was crying. While the nation grieved, a new reality was taking shape. The body of the murdered president was muscled out of Parkland against the wishes of the Dallas medical examiner and driven to Air Force One.
Inside that plane, on the tarmac at Love Field, one of the most surreal and haunting images in American history was about to be created. Lyndon B. Johnson, the vice president, was there. Jacqueline Kennedy was there, her pink suit still caked in her husband's blood. She refused to change. "Let them see," she said. "Let them see what they have done." With a judge on board, Lyndon B. Johnson placed his hand on a Bible. And there, next to the grieving, blood-stained widow, next to the coffin of his predecessor, he took the oath of office. The torch had been passed, in the darkest, most violent way possible. But who had done it? Who had pulled the trigger? The answer, it seemed, came just as quickly as the crime. Police had sealed off the Texas School Book Depository. On the 6th floor, they found it. A sniper's nest, 3 spent cartridges, and a Mannlicher Carcano rifle. A man was missing, an employee named Harvey Oswald. Oswald was a ghost, a 24-year-old ex-Marine, a misfit, a man who had defected to the Soviet Union and then returned, a man with a violent temper and a desperate need to be somebody. He was picked up, not for the assassination, but for the murder of a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tippit, whom he had gunned down less than an hour after the assassination. He was paraded in front of the cameras, a small man with a smirk and a black eye. "I didn't shoot anybody," he said, defiant. "I'm just a patsy." A patsy? Was he? The nation, desperate for answers, for any answer, held its breath. For 2 days, the world watched this strange, unsettling man. And then, on Sunday morning, the story took its next dark, impossible turn. Oswald was being transferred from the city jail to the county jail. The basement was filled with police, with reporters. It was being broadcast live. A man in a fedora, a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, stepped out of the crowd. He lunged forward. He put a pistol to Oswald's stomach, and he pulled the trigger. America watched, live on television, as the man accused of killing the president was himself murdered. The one man who held the answers, the one man who could tell the world why, was silenced forever. The chain of command was broken. The link was gone. The questions, which had been a whisper, now became a roar. The music becomes somber, elegiac, a funeral dirge. The funeral was a national trauma. The world watched as the horse-drawn caisson carried the flag-draped coffin through the streets of Washington. The sound of the muffled drumbeat, the riderless horse, blackjack with boots reversed in the stirrups. And in the center of it all, Jackie, a widow, veiled in black, leading a nation in its grief. But the most heartbreaking image, the one that broke what was left of the nation's heart, was a little boy, 3-year-old John F. Kennedy, Jr. As his father's coffin passed, he lifted his small hand, and he saluted. It was the goodbye of a son to a father. It was the goodbye of a nation to its youth. In the wake of the horror, President Johnson convened the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination, to find the truth. Their conclusion, delivered 10 months later, was simple. Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone. He fired 3 shots from the 6th-floor window. There was no conspiracy. But America didn't buy it. It couldn't be that simple. It couldn't be that a man this great, a symbol this powerful, was taken out by a 24-year-old patsy with a cheap mail-order rifle. It felt wrong. The questions piled up. The single bullet theory, the magic bullet that supposedly hit both Kennedy and Connally. The witnesses who swore they heard shots from the grassy knoll. The strange connections of Jack Ruby. The shadows of the CIA, the FBI, the Mafia, the Cubans. The Zapruder film was locked away, hidden from the public for years. When it was finally shown, it only deepened the skepticism. The assassination of John F. Kennedy wasn't just a murder. It was the beginning of our mistrust. It was the end of America's belief in its own institutions. The 60s, which had begun with such hope, would descend into a fever dream of riots, war, and more assassinations. That single shot in Dallas didn't just kill a man. It killed an idea. It killed the post-war optimism that America was invincible, that tomorrow would always be better than today. We have been arguing about it ever since. We are still, in many ways, standing in Dealey Plaza, looking up at that window, trying to make sense of the impossible. History is full of turning points, but this was different. This was a shot that echoed, a shot that changed the music of a nation, a shot that even today has never truly stopped ringing in our ears.